Gary, welcome to our show. I'm so glad to talk to you today. I don't want to ruin any surprises, but you have a quite inspiring life story.
Okay.
So tell me, what was the most difficult point in your life?
When I was studying medical technology in Long Beach Memorial Medical Center, to get it was an internship before you can get a license. And I had just come down from Montana. I wasn't used to living in a city. And I was trying to date women, but I was awfully busy with the internship. But there was a lady in the laboratory that I was really attracted to, and I was dating her and stuff. And at some point, our relationship just kind of fell apart, and I decided I was going to leave Long Beach. So I was living in this really bad apartment in downtown Long Beach, and I was saving money like crazy. So I said, well, I've had enough of this. I'm getting out of here. So that was kind of a moment where I didn't know what was going to happen, and I would have been surprised at what happened. But that was kind of a moment that changed my whole life.
What did you do next?
I'm going to get out of here. I'd spent like 2 years of my life living in a van. Mm-hmm. And I still had this van. So I hop in the van and I drove 8,000 miles across the United States. I went up the West Coast, down the Rockies, through Texas, down to the Florida Keys, and up to Boston. And I had your rail pass. I'm going to go to Europe, man. So it's going to be so fun. Three months your rail pass. So I land in London, and I saw London, and then I started hitchhiking. And when I was a kid, I used to hitchhike a lot. I was a hippie, right? Hippies hitchhike. And so I hitchhiked around the United Kingdom, clear up to Inverness, Scotland, down to Wales, Salisbury, and then I started my rail pass, and I don't know how far I went. I went from Sweden to Morocco and through 10 countries. But I ended up in Greece, and I still had $2,000. And I made one of the first of the crazy decisions that were to occur over the next year. Decisions no one in their right mind would make. Dangerous decisions. But I had $2,000, and so I bought some airline tickets and started. I said, instead, my initial plan had been to go back to London and then Boston and go home. Just like the classic. How many people? I'm going to go to Europe. I'm a 20-year-old guy. No. So I end up in Athens and go, oh, geez, I'm almost halfway around the world. Maybe I should just keep going east. And so I spent 4 months in Egypt and Israel, which were, very educational and wonderful times. Although it was kind of sad. That's when John Lennon died. That was pretty sad when I was in the Golan Heights on a banana farm. Then the next thing you know, I was in Karachi, Pakistan, and I traveled through the length of Pakistan to Lahore, over to Amritsar, where the Golden Temple is for the Sikh religion, Punjabi people, and went into India. And overall, I spent 7 months in India. Spent some time in Goa, where my wife is from. When I first met her, we had something to talk about.
You've described this travel, right, around the world that you did alone, correct? Which is also the name of your book.
Right. The Last Lonely Traveler.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know that most Americans don't have a passport. Most Americans have not furthered more than, what is the stat, like 60 miles from the place they were born.
Right.
Americans are not global travelers, and definitely not alone.
Not in the 80s. You can keep pretty busy seeing the Grand Canyon,
Fair enough. You did something that by all means is kind of crazy, right? It's the road not taken.
The crazy decision, I've got hardly any money left, and I think I'm going to keep on going to Karachi.
Right. And I can only imagine that you were telling yourself, it's going to be okay. Tell us the different stories of what you experienced.
When I went on a 200-mile trek in Nepal over the Annapurna Pass. It's almost 18,000 feet. Wearing like a cotton hoodie, right? It's like 10 below zero.
You did it in winter or summer?
Why didn't I die?
Was this winter or summer? When did you do it?
It was in the summer. I went up there when the monsoons had started in Goa. And so every day there was hail in Nepal. It's the same weather system going. And I lost like 35 pounds. I made it back to Kathmandu. And to celebrate, I actually been traveling with this German fellow on the track, and we wanted to celebrate, to have a nice dinner. And this merchant said he would make us a chicken dinner, and it makes me sad. And so he's all proud of his dinner, and the German fellow and I came to dinner at his home, and he presented us with the chicken. It was $5 for the chicken. So you know the Costco chickens that are $5? They're gigantic chickens. Well, I didn't know, coming from the United States, that most of the chickens in these third world countries or developing countries are pretty small, and I'd been spending 50 cents a day living in India, so I just spent 10 days worth of my money on a little tiny chicken, and I wasn't happy about it, and I was also really stressed out. I had been through a lot of dangerous things and physically exhausting things, and I was not polite to that guy who made that nice dinner. I was upset about it, and I let him know it. And to this day, I feel very, very bad about that. So that's one lesson I learned, that I didn't realize that how expensive meat was. Meat's cheaper here than it is for people who make way less money than we do. So, that was kind of a lesson where I was kicking myself and the rest of my life for being so rude.
And in fact, the Nepali, they eat meat somewhere between the lucky ones once a week and once a month. So in fact, for them to be able to have meat is actually quite a special occasion.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, my wife's from India. She's a Christian from Goa, right? I think St. Thomas is interned there in Goa. But yeah, she tells stories like, oh boy, my dad came home. He was a merchant marine, and we had a chicken for like 5 people and a little chicken. Right. Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, it's hard.
And we were poor, but we were hunters. And my grandfather got an elk 38 years in a row and died hunting elk up in the mountains, Bitterroot Range. Yeah. And so I was used to having meat even though we were poor. Yeah.
That's not trivial. When I did the Annapurna hike, and just to share with the audience, this is depending on when you did it, it's between 2 to 4 weeks of a hike. Right. I'm assuming for you it took about 3 weeks, right?
It took 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I didn't know anybody else who ever went up Annapurna.
It's a great hike. It's beautiful, right? You go through all these basically 4 different terrains.
Right. It's one of the changes.
One of the most beautiful things a person can do. But so you got to experience this very different culture, and there was a clash of cultures, right? You had a certain expectation. You didn't know how rare meat was, and you didn't know the difference in meat availability and pricing and cost. And your expectation basically clashed with a reality and a different culture. So you learned something from that, right? That things are not the same everywhere in the world.
Yeah, and I really appreciated my life in the United States too. I'm going, oh my God, we spend only a much smaller fraction of our income on food than everybody else.
Right. So what about the Middle East?
The place that first shocked me was when I went to Morocco, because I went from Spain to Morocco, and it was really disturbing for me that you didn't see females anywhere. And I'd go out at night to the town square, and we'd be smoking and just sipping on tea, and there were no women around, and that was pretty disturbing for me. Yeah. And it was that way in Pakistan also. I hitchhiked around Israel. I think I hitchhiked around Israel, and I hitchhiked through the Gaza Strip.
Right.
And I'm going down this highway on my way to Egypt, and I got picked up by 4 young Palestinian men in a tiny car. And I get in this car with them, and they leave the main road and start driving down this narrow wood dirt road to a village. And I get there, and the whole village came out to look at me, and they brought me. I went to the home of like the village elder, and I'm sitting there talking to him. He spoke some English, so his whole place was full of people, and there were people outside the door all wondering about what I was. And this like 9-year-old girl comes walking in, and there's no women anywhere, but this 9-year-old girl comes walking in with a metal tray full of food, and they're feeding me. And then I spent the night there, and the little girl brings in breakfast in the morning. And on my way out, the house had 2 main rooms, and there was about halfway up the center of one of the walls, there was an 8x8 hole, framed hole, and the women were on the other side. And so on my way out, I said, I yelled back to the house, thanks for the wonderful food. But I'm going, man, I never even saw these ladies that made me my food. Okay. Yeah. I took the train all the way up to the Valley of the Kings and stuff up there, and Luxor, Aswan. So I was all over, the main parts of Egypt and all around Israel for like 4 months.
I've never been, but for me, it's always been a dream to go see the pyramids.
A lot of times when I was in the Middle East, women would ask me to please go with them where they're going, because they couldn't go alone. And so we were hanging out at the pyramids, and there was nobody. There was us, these 2 people at the pyramids, nothing else. And we could climb on the pyramids. Hippies would go sleep on the top of the pyramids. If I didn't have the nerve to do that. I was able to see the Mona Lisa from like 3 inches away.
Oh, wow.
You can't do that anymore. No. The Sistine Chapel's a madhouse,
Right.
So the biggest gift in my life was that I got to see the world before the tourists came flocking in.
So you've gone from Middle East to Asia.
Sure.
That is a very different culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were your experiences there?
I wasn't really good at spotting con artists and stuff, because Montana people were more honest generally. So I had, but that's kind of a risk you have to take in order to be exposed to new situations. And overall, I'm alive. I'm still alive. I almost was not more than once. But one of the other themes of my life is coming from being raised in Montana and being really independent, is, you take risks. You're not living if you didn't take any risks. When I was a kid, my mom didn't want me to, but we used to dive off the bridge into the river really far. No adults around, right? And we did things like that. And I've broken 12 bones in every appendage and in my chest. And I've been on fire, and I've had 5 concussions, but I have had a lot of fun.
So I can't let you get away with just saying these things and then moving along. So So I'm gonna stop you there.
Okay.
You said you had some really close calls in Asia.
One close call was on Annapurna. So we were going over the ridge. I don't know if you were up to the pass,
yes,
at which you look off to your right and you see it looks like a really easy trail to the top, right? It's not. People get killed up there. Yes. But when I was up at the top, I was with the German fellow, and his feet were cold and wet.
Cold or wet?
They were wet. Seriously, man. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So
wait, let's just take a moment. Wet feet in cold, that's frostbite. You could lose a leg. You could lose a toe. This is very dangerous. And above and beyond that, you're at a high altitude. So what that means is that you're at serious risk of altitude sickness. Altitude sickness can kill. Every season we hear about either tourists or porters that people thought they were drunk. But no, that was a symptom of altitude sickness, and these people die. This is not Disneyland, right? This is a dangerous environment and a dangerous trek, and as dangerous as it is nowadays, 30 years ago it was way more dangerous. So just to kind of align everybody to what we're talking about.
You're an interesting guy, Ari. Well, you know some things many people don't understand.
I just wanted to bring our audience with
wet
us
kills, man. When I was in Alaska, people used to say cotton kills because it would get wet and freeze you to death.
That's right.
Yeah. So we almost, it really was way below zero on the. We left at 2 a.m. and started climbing. Right, and the hairs on my nose were freezing together. In Reza, Montana, I know and that was at 12,000 feet. We were going up to 18. And so we're probably experiencing maybe 20 below at some point. But yeah, and his feet got wet and he wanted to get down fast.
Yeah.
And so he was saying, let's go down in that gulch over there. That'll get us down really fast. And I'm going, no, my hobby in college was following streams to their sources. And one thing I know is, on your way, there are cascades and cliffs and, very difficult situations. And I talked him out of that. And I think
you saved his life. I got to tell you, saved his life.
I think we would have died if we'd have gone down, and we didn't have really a map, right? I mean, this is crazy stuff. and we were, and in front of us was this huge, oh my God, the most beautiful glaciers everywhere, blue ice, and the sun rose and it was golden and it was just amazing. But there was no trail because the snow on the glacier, covers up. There was no trail, and we're on this ridge eating like glucose cookies or whatever, and some frozen tea, and trying to decide how we're going to get down. I said, maybe we should cross this glacier and see what's on the other side. And if we hadn't done that, I think we would have perished. Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy. Nowadays, you're walking in a long line with other tourists because it's completely
with a guide.
With a guide, yeah. So you guys didn't even have a porter. You had nobody local.
No, we spent like 2 weeks getting up to, I can't remember the name of the town, starts with a J. Johnson, something like that. And have an airport up there. It was interesting. I'm a pilot too. I'm going, this is an interesting airport to land at. You get one chance because there's no go-rounds. You're in a valley, you go. Yeah. So, we went from 9,000 to 12,000 feet every single day for like 10 days or something. Right. And so we were, and I'm from Montana anyway, and I have a super high hemoglobin and stuff. But
your German friend is at a risky situation, right? Borderline frostbite. How'd you guys make it through?
It was hell climbing the hill. And first you'd see the sunrise and it was orange on the mountains behind us and go, the sun's rising. And it was starting to be beautiful. And then we come up over the top and there's like this blue and orange. And then there's this feeling like, we're not going to die, and I've hiked enough to know I go 3 times faster down the hill. And so the rest of it was pretty good. I walked 45 miles that day. There's another little sub story about going down the backside. So we maybe went like 5 or 10 miles down from the pass, and there was a Sherpa coming up the other way, a young guy, same age as I was, and he had a horrible cut on his foot, the ball of his foot. He didn't wear shoes, right? Maybe the Sherpas wear them now, but they didn't then. And he had this nasty cut, and he didn't speak any English. And we were having lunch by this crazy raging river with the so steep that the water's just crashing and screaming, and it's like silver because there's so much silt in it. And and so I see this cut, and I'm a medical technologist and all this, and I'm going, man, we need to help this guy. And he's helping. He's like waving his arms, help me, you know. And so we cleaned the gravel out of his cut, and I had a bunch of medical supplies because when I was in Israel, I was helping a fellow clear rocks from a field. And he was throwing me the rocks, and I was throwing them into this metal bin. And I kind of misestimated once, and I get this rock flying. It was, like a 10-pound rock. And I slammed my hand into the metal edge of the bin, and it made a hole clear through my ring finger on my right hand, and all the way through. There's a scar on both sides. And so I bandaged myself up, but I still had it in my backpack. So we put in this antibiotic salve and did all this stuff, and then we just gave him all of the supplies we had. And I was wondering, why is this guy? Why is he going that way anyway? Where's he going? I just came down from the mountain. There was nothing up there. Where's he going? Does his family live? I didn't see any huts or anything. But so then we got up and walked further down the mountain, and I realized I left my umbrella there where I was eating lunch. Okay, this says something about how important like a $2.50 umbrella can be, because I hiked 5 miles back up the mountain to get my umbrella that I bought in New York City about the time I was kidnapped by the Moonies. That's another story. But that umbrella was really important. So I'd made a 10-mile hike to go get my umbrella.
Okay, explain this to the audience. Why is the umbrella important? Why did you do that? Oh my
God! For one thing, apparently I'm mostly Swedish background. I only recently figured that out. But I needed the protection against the sun. I need protection against the wind. I need protection against the rain. That umbrella was a very valuable tool, and I could not let it go. Matter of fact, without it, I ended up, further story, I ended up getting a sunstroke at one point, yeah.
And you can't carry enough water for you for 3 weeks. Correct. What do you do?
When I was a kid, we lived not far from the Continental Divide, right? And we always drank all the water. I never remember getting sick. And so we just drank the water when I was a kid, and this was awfully high up there, But I'm a tech, and so I studied microbiology and stuff. And I'm going, most of the time in India, I drank tea all the time.
Yeah,
and there were farmer shacks, and you could stop by a farmer shack, and he would give you could buy a pancake for about a half of a rupee or something, right. And a pancake was some wheat flour that was mixed with water and cooked. And they would also, you could get some tea, and sometimes we would feel, pardon?
Dalbat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sounds familiar. And they might put some of this, what they called honey, which was my wife knows the name, but it's essentially a concentrated sugar cane juice. They made it into a pancake because you had the sweet stuff on it. Right. But yeah, I can't remember. I mean, one of my problems in India, and one of the things that influenced part of my political outlook on certain things, is that they had really high import taxes, like 200%.
Yes.
And it was really frustrating. I needed a water bottle, and I could not in 1982 purchase a bottle that did not leak. So I did have a bottle. It might have been 700 milliliters or something. But I had to keep it upright. So I would carry that, and yeah. So mostly I drank water that was probably heated up by the farmers.
So okay, you're trying to get away with this, but you said you were kidnapped.
I'm gonna get away.
Did you say you were kidnapped?
Oh, Jesus criminy! I said a lot of weird stuff happening. Okay, Jesus God. I was in New York City, and I had my red van, my Ford Econoline van, and I had a bicycle, and I was traveling around like on Fifth Avenue, and here's the naive hick in New York City, and I was approached, and they said, "Hey, do you want to go up to a farm and have a lot of fun?" And yeah, oh, okay, what the hell? And I had my van, and so they said, well, let's use your van. We'll go up there. So we went up to the Adirondacks, Upper New York, where the Moonies had they had purchased, I think it was a Boy Scout camp, and it was a big controversy. I remember it in the news. And so I ended up at this camp, and it was fun. There were nice people. It was extremely regimented. You could not do anything that wasn't. I run to this day, like 3-4 miles every Sunday. So it was Sunday, and I put on my tennis shoes and I started running down the road. And these guys say, "You got to go back. You got to." And I said, "No, I'm just finished my run." And then they'd send somebody in a car, and about the third person, they're saying, "You got to go back to the camp." And so I'm with them for a week or two, and I'm going, and I'm sitting with a group, and everybody's talking about how they enjoyed everything so much, and how it was such a friendly and nice environment, very Christian. And then one of the participants said, "Geez, when I first saw you guys, I thought you were a bunch of Moonies or something, but this World Unification Church is just wonderful." But the World Unification, they said, "No, we do follow the teachings of Reverend Moon," or whatever what his name was, and I that kind of made me feel like I'd been misled to some extent. And so a few days later, I was asking, when I first went there, they had me back my car into this kind of a dead end space in the woods, surrounded by trees, and they had to have the keys to my car. So I'm saying, I want to go now, but and then this fellow, what was his name? Really nice, really smart guy. He was the head of the church in the U.S. Dang. And he parked his car in front of mine, and so I could not get out. And so I was I'd been tricked into going into their camp, and I had given up my freedom of mobility. I was one of the only people there. Everyone else went up in a bus, but I went up in my own vehicle. Right. And so it took me 3, 4, 5 days before I finally. And I'm such a nice guy. I'm not going to be too pressure, and I like those people well enough. But finally, the point came. He said, "You got to give me the keys to my car and have the president of the church move his old Buick away from the front of it so I can go." And we'll see about maybe tomorrow. Well, I was planning. I had a buck saw, and I was planning on sawing down the trees that were surrounding my car so I could leave. And then that morning, they gave me the keys to my car. And this is one of the big lessons in my life too. And I drove away from the Moonies, and I drove these windy roads in the Adirondacks, and it was one of those viewing pullovers. And I parked the car, and I'm looking out across these valleys, and I said, "I can't believe that happened to me." I can be, essentially I was brainwashed in just a few weeks, right?
You barely dodged the bullet.
Yeah, and they really I'd considered like moving in with their group. And that was a big, because I'm this independent guy from Montana, and I was in shock that they could manipulate me to that extent. That was a big lesson in my life. There's a lot more to that story. Oh God.
So I'm not as familiar as you, obviously, about the Moons, but this is a religious cult, basically.
Yes, it is. Reverend Sun Myung Moon, I think he's a Korean. Yes. They thought he was held as a Messiah, a Christian Messiah, and the World Unification Church still exists. It's still controversial. They're famous for having these like weddings of 2,000 couples, and they're all and people that never met each other before, but they're set up by the Reverend. I think maybe Sun Myung Moon is no longer alive. You got a lot of stories to tell when you're 68 years old.
These stories, top of Annapurna, basically in a religious cult. These stories could have ended very badly.
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very badly. Okay, so you come back from your trip abroad, which lasted how long in total?
Oh, I guess a little over a year and a half.
And you're back in the States.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
what do you do?
Oh, gosh, I was sleeping in the woods in Oahu. But I remember I was back in the States, and I'm looking at these Americans, and they seem so naive, but they're happy. They had big smiles on their faces and stuff. But that was kind of caught my attention. I'm going, the Americans like live in their own world.
This is what we call a reverse cultural shock. It's when your own culture, it's a real thing.
Serious.
It's when your own culture suddenly seems weird to you after being exposed for a prolonged amount of times in different cultures. How did they seem weird? What was suddenly caught your eye? What suddenly seemed different?
I think one of the image that I actually is in my mind right now. I was in Oahu, and there was a pretty large man, kind of like a Texan with a cowboy hat on and stuff, and he had this big grin on his face, and that it just seemed so foreign after being in Asia for so long. And he was so large, and he was so well fed and so wealthy, and it just seemed really strange. One of the things that was kind of caught my attention too in some of the places, particularly Japan. I hitchhiked around Japan. Oh yeah, that's another giant story. But it was really quite evident that the young people were much bigger than their parents. Yeah, in the 80s, a lot of those parents had been through World War II, and they were, the kids were like 30% larger than their parents.
When you say bigger, you mean physically?
Physically larger people.
Why is that?
Because they had nutrition. All throughout Asia, there were some really hard times from the 40s through even the 80s. It's and so the parents did not get the nutrition they should have had, but prosperity did eventually come, and even in like Taiwan and even in India, the kids were much larger than their parents.
And there were significant world events during these years, right? You grew up through history, right?
Well, the one that comes to mind is, while we're talking right now, I almost cried several times. I'm serious. I went like 10 years of my life, and I never cried once. I had broken home, and I bought a motorcycle when I was 13 with my own money, and I went wild. And I left home when I was 17, and I was very independent and very unattached. But when I was in India, Reagan got shot. And I remember when Kennedy got shot in 1962. I was like, I don't know, what, 6 or 7. And I remember how it tore the country apart. Even as a child, I said, oh my God, this is really bad. And so when I heard that Reagan, I was in like, I don't know, Varanasi or someplace. And there's, you know, I was walking down the street and there's all these people, like in New York City or something, running every direction. And this Indian fellow says, hey, did you know Reagan got shot? And I said, are you kidding me? And he's, yeah. And I broke down crying so hard I couldn't even stand up. I'm sitting there in the street with people walking past me. And something that used to happen to me a lot in India. So, some fellow walks up to me and says, you know, come with me and let's go have some tea. That used to happen a lot. I don't know whether they're practicing English or what. They're bankers and mayors that would take this hippie and it went into their office and start talking to him. But come in here. I think it was a banking office or something. And they set me down at an empty desk and I just cried. They sat there and cried. And I thought Reagan was dead. Apparently, you know, he was just shot. Well, that's it. A snippet of the strange turns in my life. More details of these events, plus many more true stories, are graphically depicted in The Last Lonely Traveler from the Extremes. It's my novel that's available on Amazon Books. Traveler also includes a second fictional section that is surprisingly foretelling the current political environment from a centrist point of view. Please see my ancient eclectic website, biopatent.com. There is something for everyone on Biopatent, from 240Z auto mechanics, which seems to be one of the favorites, to lost wax casting, and my favorite recipes. Thanks for listening. Bye.